Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Acting Director Zients, thanks very much for being here. You got a tough job. I appreciate your time. A couple of quick questions here. The President's talked a lot about fairness, obviously. In your judgment, in the interest of fairness, what percentage of the American people should pay no net income taxes at all?
I think that's a hard thing to put a percentage on. What we want to do is we want to grow the middle class. Yeah. And as we grow the middle class, more and more people will pay tax.
But it's about half right now, and this budget would increase that number. So I can only infer that the belief is that a fairer system is one in which more than half of all Americans pay no net income tax at all.
We have a situation where wealth is very concentrated in a few percent of people. And what we're asking is for that top 2% to pay their fair share, which is a share consistent with the share they paid in the 1990s.
That's not all you're asking for. But I've got another question. Do you agree with White House Chief of Staff Jack Lew that it takes 60 votes to pass a budget in the Senate?
It takes 60 votes to pass a budget like the BCA, which was passed.
That's not a budget. You know it. It's a budget resolution. Now,
budget resolution is 51 votes.
Right. It's 51 votes. Okay. So the clear and unambiguous fact is that the Democrats who control the Senate could pass a budget without a single Republican vote if they chose to exercise the leadership of actually pursuing a budget.
Well, I would say there was a lot of leadership involved in passing the $2 trillion of deficit reduction, which was included in the BCA, which was passed this past summer.
I want to commend our chairman, who has indicated an interest in marking up a budget in this committee. I welcome that. I think that's the responsible thing to do. I will be extremely disappointed if the Democratic majority chooses to go yet another year without laying out the case to the American people of how much money they think we should spend and on what and in which categories and where the revenue should come from.
But I would say just one thing. I would say beyond process, the most important thing here is getting outcome, getting policy enacted in law. So, like the BCA, there's now an opportunity to do balanced deficit reduction. So we look forward to the President's policies being put into law.
Well, part of the problem is that we haven't addressed the big policy issues that we ought to, and Senator Portman addressed this. You know, when I look at just a few categories of federal spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on our debt, do you know how much they grow in the President's budget over the 10-year window, just those items? I wouldn't expect you to have the number at the top of your head. It's almost 8% per year compounded. It's 7.9 to be precise. Now, as you know, your own forecast for GDP, which is quite ambitious given the very anti-growth policies you've got in there, but nominal GDP growth isn't anywhere near that level. So my question for you is it even arithmetically possible to sustain indefinitely growth in big government programs that is consistently, in fact, always higher than the economy grows?
Let me take it piece by piece. On health care, the President and Congress put forward and passed the Affordable Care Act, which CBO scores at $100 billion of savings in its first decade, $1 trillion in its second. This budget puts forward $360 billion of additional health care savings. On the Social Security side, it's not our immediate problem. At the same time, the President stands ready to address Social Security. At the root cause of much of what you're talking about are our demographics, our baby boomers retiring. And we view this budget as a very important milestone, real progress. At the end of the day, more needs to be done. Let's get this chapter under our belt. Let's achieve this level of deficit reduction, and then we can look up and talk about more.
Well, I just have to say this is an extremely disappointing approach to this. What you ran through it's fully reflected in the numbers that I'm citing. And despite whatever savings you attribute to the programs the President's proposing, these programs are still growing far faster than anything that's sustainable. And everybody who's looked at this honestly, and every bipartisan commission and group, comes to only one conclusion. In fact, the President has acknowledged that mandatory health care spending is the problem, and this President refuses to propose a solution. I think this is extremely irresponsible, and what you are doing with the huge tax increases jeopardizes economic growth while not addressing the fundamental driver of our deficits. I just think this is a huge absence of leadership.